Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel, Abeer's Book Reviews. And today it's not going to be a review. It's going to be a sort of tradition that I have on this channel, which is recounting my top books for the previous year, 2024. Now, the few times that I have actually done this sort of a recount, I've mentioned my top 10 or top 15 books. But this year I decided to narrow the list further down to the top 5. I just decided to make it a bit more comprehensible and a bit more concise and really focus on the books which had the deepest impact on me this year. And sort of go back to the first principles because a lot of the books that I read this year sort of stemmed from one particular book or one particular genre that I read. So I really want to focus on those impacts. So let's just get started. The fifth best book of this year was The Coddling of the American Mind by Greg Lukianoff and Jonathan Haidt. Now, I know this book has been around for quite a lot of time, and I recently just got around to reading it at the beginning of 2024, and I must say it is an absolutely amazing book. To give you a simple just sort of synopsis, it's about the Gen Z youth of America and how their ideologies are being pampered to, and they're basically not evolving emotionally, culturally, politically, and how that creates a great divide in the society, and how it is one of the biggest threats to modern society, according to Greg Lukianoff and Jonathan Haidt. Absolutely amazing book. It's also one of the books that sort of really got me interested in society, in books about society and about human development and about human psychology. So one of the first books I read this year, and a lot of the other books I read were based off of this and my particular liking for this book. So here it is once again. And of course, if you want to check out more in detail reviews, I have reviewed each one of them on my channel. You can just go on there and check it out. Now, number 4, it's going to be The New Confessions of an Economic Hitman by John Perkins. How America Really Took Over the World. Now, this year was the great year for elections. Over 50% of the global population took part in an election. So a lot of the news that I was hearing, a lot of the buzz around me at the beginning of the year was about politics. And, getting more interested in politics, I started off with sort of a history lesson, about the great empires of the past and the modern world superpowers. And that led me to the American Empire, the golden age of the American Empire, right after World War II up until today, where basically America runs the world. And John Perkins decodes in this book why that is. And he used to basically work for a company which was under contract of the American government. And what they would do has been described as the job of an economic hitman. They would go to foreign countries. They would make them a proposition that we set up your power grids, we set up your infrastructure, we set up your water supply, whatever. And, we give you a bunch of loans to build your other stuff. And over time, what happens is that these countries become so severely indebted to America that they just end up falling in line to America's whims and fancies. Amazing book. It really got me interested into this field of investigative journaling, which I really pursued this year. If you talk about books such as Putin's People, The World for Sale, Kleptopia, a bunch of other ones. And this is the one book which started it all, and it's absolutely one of the best books I've read ever, and highly recommend it to anyone wanting to learn how America really took over the world from the perspective of John Perkins. So yeah, that's it. Now, third place is going to be sort of an odd one because I have strayed from the realm of fiction quite a lot in recent times. Generally, whenever I reread fiction, it's in the or sorry, whenever I do read a fiction book, it's just rereading some book that I had earlier in my collection. So, for example, I felt like reading fiction, so I read the first two books of A Song of Ice and Fire this year. And I don't really pick up new fiction books that often, but this year I did, and it is The Remainder by Alia Trabuco Zeran. Here it is. It's a short read, it's a very concise book, it's an absolutely amazing style of writing. Alia Trabuco Zeran's writing is something which really appealed to me about this book. As I mentioned in my review of it as well, it's sort of in the style of Alex Michaelides, who wrote The Maidens and The Silent Patient. Amazing book, impressive writing. The story is also quite fascinating because, it's not a very typical book. It's quite atypical, and I think that is what really appeals to me about this. So here it is, The Remainder by Alia Trabuco Zeran, coming in at number 3. Now for number 2, it was sort of a dichotomy or a conundrum that I had. It was either going to be Animal Farm by George Orwell or 1984 by George Orwell. And I have decided to go with Animal Farm. And I'll give you my reasons why. So I feel like Animal Farm, from the perspective of a reader, is just a much more easier read than 1984, because 1984 in some parts just gets very monotonous and boring. Now, obviously, that's not to discredit 1984 because it's a very historically important book. It's a classic piece of literature that everyone should read. But the reason I picked Animal Farm over 1984 is that it's much more concise. I feel like it's in some ways better written than 1984. And also because I feel that the takeaways people can get from this book are much more timeless than what you get from 1984. This is about the eternal power dynamics in any society and how power can corrupt people, even the ones who were sort of seen as infallible. Whereas 1984 kind of serves as a warning against an authoritarian state. So yeah, the second best book of this year by George Orwell, Animal Farm. Now the best book of this year is a book that really sparked my interest in philosophy, and it is the one which gave me a brand new perspective on a lot of things, especially keeping in mind some of the biases that I might have had about ancient Greek people. And yes, by that hint, you might have guessed that it is The Republic by Plato. It is so amazing. It's a must-read for everyone, I feel like. Plato's Republic really gives you new perspectives, and it almost shatters a lot of the biases that you might have had, and I've talked extensively about them in my review. But sort of a quick synopsis would be that Plato talks about building the ideal, or sorry, Socrates talks about building the ideal state. What should be the ruler of the ideal state be like? How should we govern it? How should it function? What type of roles do the various citizens play? There is a class divide of citizens that Socrates suggests, and also a lot of very useful things that we could employ in modern times. And for example, the way Socrates talks about educating the youth of the ideal state, how he talks about the role of women in an ideal state, the equal opportunities that he advocates for women. He says that they also have a right to serve in the army or become teachers or whatever if they're up to the mark. If they're capable enough, they have the right to do that. Amazing book. And like I said in my review, I'll preface this again by saying that this book was written during a time when Athens and Sparta had just concluded a war, and Athens had lost, and Socrates and Plato were both Athenian citizens. And so, coming from that turbulent time, where the power dynamics are not really stable, there's a lot of societal dismay, perhaps some. The society is not as cohesive as one would like. And so, coming from that perspective, if you think about the things said in the book, they do make sense, like advocating for a very strong, almost authoritarian figure in the form of a philosopher king, instead of just having a normal democratic society where you just elect someone regardless of their social standing. That is something that Plato and Socrates argue against, and obviously that is something that seems totally alien to us in the modern society. But if you look at it from the historical perspective, if you place yourself in the shoes of Plato and Socrates, you can make sense of a lot of the arguments they make, even though they would hold no ground in current human society. Once again, here is the best book of the year, Plato's Republic. Absolutely fundamental reading for anyone over the age of 15, I would say. So yeah, that's all about the best books of 2024. As you can see, I am currently reading God is Dead by Friedrich Nietzsche, so that's going to be coming out shortly once I do actually finish reading it, because it's not an easy read. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you hit the like button. If you're new and haven't already done so, subscribe to the channel to keep receiving more videos like this one. I've been Abeer Rao, and thanks for watching.